DiJonai Carrington's brutal hit on Sophie Cunningham has sparked a massive controversy, and Shaq is now jumping into the middle of it. He's taking Sophie's side and going off on Carrington, especially after what she posted following her ejection. Let me break it down. Saturday afternoon in Chicago, the Fever and the Sky, a rivalry that's already been simmering all season, and it boiled over in the first quarter. Sophie Cunningham broke ahead of the pack on a fast break, nothing but green grass in front of her, an easy transition layup waiting. DiJonai Carrington had other plans. She chased Cunningham down from behind, and instead of getting a clean piece of the ball, she caught her across the face and neck. Cunningham was ahead of the pack for a breakaway layup when Carrington chased her down and swiped down with her left arm across the face and neck area, causing Cunningham to land on her backside without being able to break her fall. The shot still went in. That's the part that makes it look worse in replay. Cunningham banked the layup while getting knocked flat on her back. Officials on the floor initially waved it off as a common foul. Then they went to the monitor, and what they saw changed everything. Officials initially called a common foul, but after a review, upgraded it to a flagrant 2 and ejected Carrington. The crew chief laid out exactly why after the game, saying the review found the contact was unnecessary and excessive to a player in a vulnerable position. Cunningham didn't stay down. Cunningham quickly got up, while teammate Michaela Timpson stepped between the two players. However, the drama continued online. That's underselling it a little. She popped up, went straight at Carrington, and got a shove in before Timpson and the training staff pulled her back. Refs let it slide. They decided her reaction didn't warrant a technical given what had just happened to her. When referees were asked why Cunningham was not issued a technical foul for pushing Carrington after the play, the refs said the reaction was acceptable given the severity of the initial contact. So at this point, you've got a flagrant 2, an ejection, a near fight, and a bleeding Fever player. Normally, that's the whole story. A hard foul, a review, a suspension conversation, a couple news cycles, done. But then Carrington walked off the floor, got to the tunnel, pulled out her phone and typed 2 words that turned a basketball play into a headline that's still running days later. Shortly after the ejection, a post reading white privilege appeared on Carrington's Threads account, tagging the Indiana Fever. 2 words, all caps, tagged straight at the team of the woman she just hit in the face. Cunningham found out about the post pretty fast because reporters brought it straight to her in the locker room. She didn't dodge it. She said the foul was absolutely intentional, and clearly I think it was unnecessary, adding that she'd never really spoken to her and I have no beef with her, but I guess she has some pent-up stuff. Then she went further, connecting the foul to what she believes is a pattern of players trying to make a name for themselves against her and Caitlin Clark specifically, saying she thinks that's why Carrington did it, for the attention. I popped up, Cunningham said. I'm not going to let anyone just do that to me. I think everyone knows that. I think that's why she did it, because she wants attention. On the white privilege post specifically, Cunningham was blunt. She flatly rejected any racial explanation for the ejection, pointing out she'd been ejected herself for an almost identical play just a year earlier, and didn't dress it up as anything other than what it was. Cunningham rejected Carrington's suggestion that the ejection had anything to do with race. I think the league is taking care of that. This has nothing to do with race. Last year, I did the same thing and I got kicked out, and I deserve to be kicked out. She capped it off, telling Carrington there was no reason to even bring race into it. There's no reason even to play that card. Now here's where it gets bigger than 2 players, because this wasn't just a fight between Cunningham and Carrington. Coaches got pulled into it within minutes. The league office got pulled into it within the hour, and by the time cameras stopped rolling on the post-game pressers, this had become the story the entire WNBA was talking about, instead of the actual scoreboard, which had Indiana winning 90-86. Fever head coach Stephanie White found herself in an odd spot. She'd coached Carrington before, back at Connecticut, and when reporters pushed her on whether the foul was intentional, she wouldn't go there. It was a hard foul, White said. I don't think that DiJonai intentionally came out to get her across the neck like she did. But it did happen, and I thought it was the right call. She went a step further, defending Carrington's overall game, saying Carrington competes hard and that nobody just strolls in for a layup against her, while stopping short of saying Carrington deliberately went for the neck. That didn't sit well with everybody in Indiana. More on that in a bit. Meanwhile, on the other bench, Sky coach Tyler Marsh had a completely different read on it in real time. And when reporters asked if the surrounding drama around the Fever added extra juice to the matchup, he shut that down fast, saying his team wasn't thinking about any of that. We are fighting for our lives to try to make the playoffs. Marsh said. DiJonai is a passionate player, just like most of the players on our team. Our mindset is trying to win games, as a player and as a coaching staff. So you've got the Fever's own coach softening the intent question, the Sky's coach calling it passion, and Cunningham standing alone insisting it was on purpose. That's the fault line right there. And that's exactly the kind of split that pulls outside voices in. And one of the loudest, biggest voices in basketball did not stay on the sideline. To understand why this blew up the way it did, you have to know who DiJonai Carrington is. Because this wasn't some random rookie throwing out a wild accusation. She's a name, she's got a track record, and people who follow her closely say this fits a pattern. Carrington came into the league as a serious prospect. She played college basketball for Stanford and Baylor, before being drafted 20th overall by the Connecticut Sun in the 2021 WNBA draft. Before that, she was one of the most productive high school players in the country. Carrington attended Horizon Christian Academy in San Diego, California, where she scored over 2,000 career points, while averaging 18.8 points, 13.5 rebounds, 4.0 assists, and 2.5 steals per game. She picked up national recognition for it too. She was named a McDonald's All-American and a Jordan Brand Classic All-American. By 2026, she's not a bench player nobody's heard of. She's a legit two-way threat. Carrington, 28, is a former All-Defensive First-Team selection and won the WNBA's Most Improved Player Award. In 2024, she's the kind of defender coaches specifically design game plans around, which is exactly why she was the one chasing down Cunningham on that fast break in the first place. But there's another side to her resume, and it's the side that made this incident feel less like a one-off and more like the latest chapter. Carrington is also known for making some questionable plays on the court, and once even drew backlash for poking Cunningham's star teammate Caitlin Clark in the eye. During a playoff game, that was back in the 2024 postseason, and it was already a controversy of its own. Days of slow-motion replays, days of debate over whether it was deliberate. So when her name popped up again attached to another disputed contact play against another Fever player, a lot of people weren't shocked. They'd seen this movie before. There's also the personal drama that had nothing to do with basketball, and it landed right before this. During the All-Star break, just weeks before her confrontation with Cunningham, Carrington sent shockwaves through the WNBA by publicly detonating her former relationship on social media, taking to threads to launch a spontaneous, unprovoked attack on her ex-girlfriend, Las Vegas Aces forward Nalissa Smith. The two had a real history. They had dated since their college days at Baylor in 2020, and even briefly played together for the Dallas Wings. And Carrington's public call-out of her, a full year removed from the breakup, was its own minor firestorm on WNBA social media. Smith brushed off the allegations publicly rather than engaging, so by the time Saturday's game tipped off, Carrington already had a summer full of headlines that had nothing to do with box scores. Add the flagrant 2, add the ejection, add the 2 words posted from the tunnel, and you get a controversy that landed on every sports desk in the country within hours. Here's the thing about the post itself. Carrington didn't just say something vague. She tagged the team account directly. DiJonai Carrington of the Chicago Sky was ejected Saturday after being called for a flagrant 2 foul on Sophie Cunningham of the Indiana Fever. Minutes later, Carrington posted on social media the words "white privilege" and tagged the Fever. Not the referees, not the league. The Fever specifically, the team of the player she just fouled. The racial dimension of it is impossible to talk around, and reporters didn't try to. Cunningham, who is white, was shooting a fast break layup in the first quarter, when Carrington, who is black, came from behind and hit her in the head and neck, knocking her to the court as the shot went in. That's the framing nearly every outlet used, because it's the framing Carrington herself invited. The moment she typed those 2 words. Days later, Carrington tried to walk part of it back. Sort of. She pushed back on the idea that she was accusing the referees specifically of racial bias in the flagrant call. DiJonai Carrington of the Chicago Sky says she never claimed that the assessment of a flagrant foul 2 on her Saturday in a game against Indiana was the result of white privilege. That clarification didn't exactly calm things down, because the post was already screenshotted, already viral, already the subject of 100 hot takes by the time she said anything else about it. And it wasn't just fans arguing about it. Actual players picked sides publicly. Sydney Colson, who used to be Cunningham's own teammate in Indiana, sided with Carrington. Former Indiana Fever player Sydney Colson picked her side with a social media comment on DiJonai Carrington's hard foul on Sophie Cunningham. Coulson used the moment to needle Cunningham over an entirely different controversy: her public stance on transgender athletes in women's sports, turning her post into a Threads message, where she made her allegiance with Carrington clear with a clever pun, referencing Cunningham's recent stance on trans athletes in the WNBA, with a pun on the foul being a transition foul. That's a former teammate publicly siding against Cunningham days after the incident. Media reactions split just as hard. Fox commentators accused the broader WNBA media ecosystem of rushing to defend Carrington while being quicker to explain away hits on white players. The response to Saturday's incident exposes a persistent imbalance within WNBA coverage. When physical aggression is directed at white players, such as Cunningham or Caitlin Clark, commentators have repeatedly shown a willingness to search for explanations that soften the actions of the offending player. Fox Sports personality Tomi Lahren went even further, on air, framing the entire situation as embarrassing for the league. The WNBA is a joke for allowing this to continue. It's a league that desperately wants to be taken seriously, but they do everything that they possibly can to not be taken seriously, she said, and she specifically called out Carrington's social media activity as crossing a line. Meanwhile, the league itself had to step in. This wasn't just going to blow over. As a two-day story, the commissioner's office got directly involved. As more voices joined in and the drama continued to grow, League Commissioner Kathy Engelbert sent a memo this week to players and teams, explaining how the WNBA is approaching the situation. And the topic will be discussed at a previously scheduled meeting with WNBA presidents and general managers next week. That's the point where this stopped being a locker room story and became a league-wide policy conversation. So when a seven-time NBA champion, a guy who spent his entire post-playing career building a platform as the loudest voice in basketball media, decides to wade into this, he's not walking into a small local dispute. He's walking into a story the commissioner's office is already treating as a 5-alarm fire. If Carrington walked into this with baggage, Cunningham walked in with just as much, maybe more, just from a completely different direction. To get why Shaq's involvement landed the way it did, you need to understand what kind of year Cunningham was already having before this hit even happened. She's not a star by traditional numbers. Cunningham has never been an all-star and is only averaging 9.1 points per game this season. But numbers were never really the point with her. She became famous for something else entirely, being the physical presence next to Caitlin Clark, the one who steps in when things get chippy. Cunningham previously got a social media boost for defending teammate Caitlin Clark, which occurred during a game against the Connecticut Sun, and she earned the nickname Enforcer from Fever fans. That single moment reshaped her entire public identity. Following the altercation, her social media account grew. She gained approximately 700,000 followers on TikTok and 244,000 on Instagram in just a few days, pushing her TikTok total past the 1 million mark. That's a player who built a brand on being the one who fights back. So when Carrington's foul landed, the internet already had a script ready to run. The enforcer, hit in the face, getting up swinging. It fit the character she'd already built for herself over the past year. But there's a wrinkle, and it's the one that gave Carrington supporters their ammunition almost instantly. Cunningham has thrown a hard foul of her own before, and it hasn't been forgotten. A video of the Fever guard committing a similar flagrant 2 foul during the 2025 season resurfaced, following Carrington's ejection Saturday, and the old footage quickly went viral, prompting fans to compare the two controversial plays. In that earlier incident, Cunningham appeared to wrap up Sheldon intentionally to stop a scoring opportunity, while Carrington made contact while attempting to challenge Cunningham's shot. Different context, but the same result. Both plays were ruled unnecessary and excessive by officials, and both resulted in immediate confrontations and ejections. Cunningham herself brought that comparison up unprompted. She wasn't hiding from it. It's actually why this has nothing to do with raceline landed as hard as it did. She was pointing at her own history as proof the system treats hard fouls the same regardless of who commits them. Then there's the completely separate controversy that had already made her a target months before any of this: her public position on transgender athletes competing in women's sports. In an ESPN article published last month, she voiced support for barring transgender girls and women from girls and women's sports, which led to small protests and rallies outside Fever games in Seattle and Portland. That stance had already turned her into one of the most polarizing figures in the league, independent of anything happening on the court. It's the reason Coulson's dig referenced it directly, and it's the backdrop a huge chunk of the "she deserved it" commentary was built on. Cunningham hasn't been shy about any of it either. She's picked fights with media figures too. When Skip Bayless called her a clout chaser on air, she didn't let it slide. "Dude, Skip, who's the clout chaser? You're literally using my name as your headline, so people can click on it," Cunningham said. "And like, my thing is, I don't mind the guy. I don't mind the guy. I have no beef with you." That's the pattern with her. She answers everything, publicly, usually on her own podcast. And that podcast has actually gotten her in trouble with the league before, more than once. Sophie Cunningham has been fined $500 by the WNBA after being found guilty of violating league policy regarding public comments on officiating. That wasn't even her first fine for talking too freely about the league. It was 3 times the charm for Cunningham, as she revealed the WNBA fined her again for criticizing officiating on her podcast, telling her co-host she got fined for comments regarding Dallas Wings guard Paige Buchers. So this is a player who talks a lot, publicly, repeatedly, who's already built a brand around being combative and unfiltered, who's already drawn league fines for running her mouth about officiating, and who now has a viral flagrant foul and a race accusation attached to her name in the same week. That combination, a polarizing lightning rod on one side, and a player accusing her of getting away with things because of her skin color on the other, is exactly the kind of matchup that pulls retired legends off the sidelines and onto camera, which is exactly what happened next. There's also a detail that made the whole situation sting a little more for Fever fans specifically. Carrington wasn't even a stranger doing something out of nowhere. She'd already crossed paths with this exact team before, in a moment that still gets replayed constantly. The clash also revived memories of Carrington's 2024 playoff incident involving Caitlin Clark. That play sparked days of debate and added another layer to the Fever Sky rivalry. 2 incidents, 2 years apart, same team on the receiving end. That's not coincidence in the eyes of Fever fans. That's a pattern. And it's exactly the framing a lot of commentary, including Shaq's, would end up leaning on. This is where the story stops being a WNBA locker room dispute and turns into a national basketball conversation. Because Shaquille O'Neal doesn't weigh in on things quietly, and he doesn't weigh in on things that don't matter to him. Shaq's had his eye on the Fever situation for a while now. He's already gone on record about how physical play toward Caitlin Clark should be viewed, framing it in terms only a guy who took decades of hard fouls himself could really sell. NBA Hall of Famer Shaquille O'Neal knows a thing or two about getting fouled. During his NBA career, O'Neal faced punishment from some of the meanest big men around, and due to his spotty free throw ability, he often found himself subject to some pretty rough and obvious fouls from defenders. That's exactly why he felt qualified to speak on it. To O'Neal, what Clark is facing is something all the greats endured early in their careers, and during an interview with CNBC, O'Neal said all the hard fouls and rough treatment against Clark are rites of passage that talented players have to overcome. That's Shaq's baseline position going into this. Physicality is part of the game, and stars have to absorb it, toughen up, take the hit, and keep moving. It's a stance he's repeated in different forms across multiple interviews, and it's the lens through which he watches every one of these Fever-related dust-ups. So when the Carrington-Cunningham flagrant hit the news cycle, it landed right in Shaq's wheelhouse. This wasn't just a hard foul anymore, though. This had the extra layer, the white privilege post, the accusation of a racial double standard behind the ejection. And that's the part that visibly changed his tone, where his Clark comments had been almost fatherly. Toughen up, this is normal. This is basketball. His reaction to the Carrington situation carried an edge that reflected just how far this incident had traveled. Past just a hard foul, the clip of him addressing it spread fast enough that it became its own standalone moment online, separate from the original foul entirely. People weren't just talking about Cunningham getting hit anymore. They were talking about what Shaq said about it. That's the power he carries. A 7-footer with 4 championship rings doesn't have to say much to redirect an entire news cycle. One clear, blunt take from him, and suddenly the framing of the whole story shifts from controversial ejection to Shaq versus Carrington's explanation for it. What made it land even harder is that Shaq wasn't coming into this cold. He'd already established on the record that he thinks Fever players get put through the ringer more than anyone else in the league, and that a chunk of that comes from targeted physicality rather than normal basketball competitiveness. Once you've already said the words rite of passage about one Fever player getting hit, and then a second Fever player gets hit in the head on a play upgraded to a flagrant 2, followed immediately by a race-based explanation for the punishment, that's not a neutral hard foul anymore in his eyes. That's confirmation of exactly the pattern he'd already flagged. And that's really the crux of why this became such a big story, rather than just another one-week WNBA controversy. It wasn't just fans arguing on threads and Twitter anymore. It was a Hall of Fame big man, one of the most recognizable faces in all of basketball media, putting his name and his platform directly behind Cunningham's side of the story, at the exact moment the league office was trying to figure out how to handle the fallout quietly. Because remember, this wasn't just a two-player dispute by this point. The commissioner had already sent that memo to every team and player in the league. General managers already had a meeting scheduled specifically to talk about this incident. Reporters were already treating it as a defining moment for how the WNBA disciplines and talks about race in officiating decisions into that already boiling pot. Shaq didn't drop a gentle take. He dropped gasoline. It also mattered who he was choosing not to side with. Carrington had real institutional backing in this fight. Her own head coach defended her character on the record, saying she's simply a competitor who plays hard, not someone trying to injure people. Cunningham's own coach, Stephanie White, wouldn't fully back her either, softening the intent question in Carrington's favor, even while agreeing with the officiating decision itself. So Cunningham, in a real sense, was standing more alone in this than Carrington was. Her own bench wasn't fully in her corner on the intent question. That's exactly the kind of underdog dynamic that pulls someone like Shaq off the sidelines. He wasn't just defending a player who got hit. He was defending a player who, in his eyes, wasn't getting fully backed, even by the people who were supposed to have her back. And once Shaq puts his voice behind something, it doesn't stay contained to basketball media. It crosses over into general sports talk shows, into clip compilations, into reaction videos. Exactly the kind of cross-platform explosion that turned a first-quarter foul in a Fever Sky game into a topic being debated on outlets that don't normally cover WNBA basketball at all. That's the difference between a story staying inside the league and a story breaking out into the wider sports conversation. Shaq's name attached to it did that. By the time the dust started to settle, this had turned into something much bigger than one flagrant foul, and it's still not fully resolved. The league's response is still playing out in real time. As more voices joined in and the drama continued to grow, League Commissioner Kathy Engelbert sent a memo this week to players and teams explaining how the WNBA is approaching the situation, with the topic set to be discussed at a previously scheduled meeting with WNBA presidents and general managers next week. That's not a small procedural note. That's the commissioner's office treating this as something that needs a coordinated league-wide answer, not just a fine or a suspension handed down and forgotten. Politics even found its way into it. Indiana's lieutenant governor weighed in directly on Stephanie White's handling of the situation, demanding accountability from the Fever's own coaching staff for not fully backing Cunningham. Indiana Lieutenant Governor Micah Beckwith demanded White's firing, following her defense of Carrington, posting, "The Indiana Fever need to let Stephanie White go. No solid coach would ever take the side of the opposing team's player who committed a flagrant foul on one of your own players. Terrible coaching. The Fever need to defend their players." That's a sitting state official publicly calling for a WNBA head coach's job over how she talked about a foul in a press conference. That's how far outside the arena this traveled. Carrington, for her part, tried to soften her own message days later, insisting the accusation was never really about the referees themselves. DiJonai Carrington of the Chicago Sky says she never claimed that the assessment of a flagrant foul on her Saturday in a game against Indiana was the result of white privilege. But by then, the post had already been screenshotted 100,000 times, already dissected by commentators, already turned into the exact kind of race and sports flashpoint that doesn't get walked back with one follow-up comment. Even sports media figures who don't normally cover the WNBA weighed in against the framing. Emmanuel Asho used his own podcast platform to say plainly that calling that foul a product of white privilege cheapens the actual term and ignores basketball's own rule book, according to Newsweek's coverage of his comments. And here's the part that keeps this story from actually being over. These two teams aren't done with each other this season. Carrington has made it clear that she is looking forward to the next meeting between the teams, with Indiana set to travel to Wintrust Arena to face Chicago on August 23, giving Carrington and Cunningham an opportunity to share the court again. That's not a throwaway detail. That's a rematch already circled on the calendar, with a foul call, a race accusation, a coach controversy, and a Hall of Famer's public backing all sitting on the table, before either team has even stepped back on the floor together. Cunningham, for her part, doesn't sound like someone looking to let it go quietly either. Every time she's been asked about it since, she's repeated the same core message. The foul was intentional. The race explanation doesn't hold up, and she's not interested in pretending otherwise, just to keep the peace. That's consistent with everything she's done all year, whether it's fighting with Skip Bayless on air or accepting league fines rather than staying quiet about officiating. She's not built to let a story like this fade out on its own, and neither, it turns out, is the audience that's been feeding off every update. What's clear is that this isn't really about one foul anymore, and it hasn't been for days. It's become a stand-in for a bigger fight the WNBA has been having with itself all season, about who gets protected on the floor, who gets believed off it, and who gets to define what a hard foul actually means once cameras, hashtags, and now Hall of Famers get involved. Shaq picking a side didn't settle any of that. If anything, it guaranteed that when Cunningham and Carrington share a court again on the 23rd, every single possession between them is going to be watched by a lot more people than usual. And a lot of them are going to be listening for what Shaq has to say about it the second the final buzzer sounds.